So I'm Tiffany, the parent of Renaya, and Jenna was our advocate last year, and she has helped us through one of the worst things we have faced so far. It was last year, February. I was at work. I work about 5 minutes from my daughter's school, and I got a call from my daughter, and she told me to come get her, which she does often because she's very spoiled. And but her voice and her tone was just very different. So I asked her what was wrong, and before she could tell me what was wrong, my sister was calling me on the other line, and my sister said, Tiffany, I got something to tell you. Don't be mad. So I immediately started to panic. I'm like, what's wrong? My sister said Renaya got caught at school with an edible. I'm like, an edible? So I immediately was appalled, angry, all kind of emotions running through me. But I had to maintain my composure because I'm at work. I'm with the CEO of my company. We're all headed to lunch. So I had to excuse myself from the lunch, and I rushed over to the school. When I got to the school, I noticed that my daughter's friend was laying out on the bench in the hallway. And I can see my daughter in the corner of the principal's office, and her face is red. I can tell she had been crying. And I'm like, what is going on? The dean of students informed me that my daughter was caught with an edible. And as a parent, you know your child. You know what your child will do and what they won't do. You know about how far they're going to push that envelope. So for me, I couldn't believe it because this was so far left for my kid. So they had the school police department there, and they asked for permission to search the rest of her belongings. And as a parent, I believe my daughter didn't have anything, so I gave them permission to search her belongings, and they found the rest of the edible in a side pocket of her book bag. I was completely embarrassed and heartbroken. And then anger came back again. And my daughter was just sitting there crying. She's very timid. She's very shy. And I'm like, where did you get this from? So the dean explained to me that earlier that day, this is about 2:00 in the afternoon. So earlier that day, about 10 a.m., my daughter and her friend were in the bathroom. The other student took the edible and said she got it from my daughter. And I'm like, well, where did she get it from? So my daughter said that it wasn't hers. And I believed her because I know my daughter's character. So they explained to me that she would be suspended for 10 days, and we'll have a meeting. We'll revisit everything. And my daughter had been there a couple years. So over those years, I had built a rapport with the dean of students, and she kind of gave me reassurance that because my daughter was such a good student, she's an AB student, never got in trouble, that everything would be okay. So the police was still there, and they asked me what would I like to do with my child. I told them, you can take her. And I did that to teach my daughter a lesson. I'm never going to encourage her to make bad choices. I want her to know that when you make those choices, these are the consequences that you have to face. So I gave her a little tough love. And she was screaming and begging, Mom, please don't let them take me. I said, no, you have to go. I went back to work. I couldn't even finish the rest of the day. I let her sit there for a couple hours before I went and got her. So when she got in the car and I picked her up from the police station, I was so heartbroken, I couldn't even say anything to her. I couldn't talk to her right then. So later that evening, when I calmed down, we had a conversation about it. I said, Renaya, what happened? She explained to me that a couple weeks prior, her friend, who she thought was her friend, gave her the edible to hold and asked her to bring it back to school that day. And I said, well, did you take it? She said, I didn't take any of it, Ma. She did. I'm like, well, do you have anything to support what you're saying? She said, no. I said, y'all didn't text about it? Y'all didn't talk about it? And she said, well, we did on Snapchat. And I'm like, because I know Snapchat, the messages erased. So I'm like, well, that's like, you have to have some type of defense for yourself. It's your word against hers. So she said, well, wait, she did text me. So after after the other student took the edible, she texted my daughter like, see, I told you everything was fine. Nothing was going to happen. But she started hallucinating during the day. And throughout the day, her symptoms got worse. And that's how they led to the situation. So I said, well, this is something. I screenshot it. And then I also took my daughter to have her drug tested through Beaumont Health. And she came back. I tested her for everything and she came back negative. So I'm like, no, you didn't take the edible. So I had emailed those documents to the school, and I also requested the rest of her work, and the dean kind of like blew me off. She didn't respond back to my emails. So since I work very close to the school, I would go up there. Hey, do you have work for Renaya? Oh, we're getting it together. You can come pick it up on Friday. Get there on Friday. They have nothing for her. I'm like, hey, well, did you see my email? I sent you the drug test, and, she's due to come back to school on this day. And she said, oh, no, we'll talk about it. Kind of blew me off again. And I'm like, okay. So we had another meeting at the school, and me and her father went, and they told me that they were expelling her from school. And I became angry again because I'm like, you told me 2 weeks ago that everything was going to be okay, and this is not okay. So they gave me the student code, and, well, because of this and this policy, and we have to follow these procedures, and she has to go. I'm like, okay. So they said, well, you can appeal the decision, but, drug-related offenses we're pretty strict with that, and I'm pretty sure that, the decision is going to stick. I'm like, well, I'm going to try my luck, and I filed for an appeal. I went to work the next day, and I was venting to a coworker who told me to call the Student Advocacy Center. And I called. I left a message. I got a call back that same day from Jenna, and she explained to me a little bit about the program. And she said, I may or may not be your advocate, but this is what we do, and this is how we can possibly help. You'll get a call back and go through the intake process. Very fast process. So Jenna was assigned to me to be my advocate, and I brought her up to speed on the things that I had done. And by the time I had met with Jenna, I had already had my appeal hearing, which they decided to send my daughter to an alternative school. And at that time, I was just ready to pull my daughter out of the school district altogether. But I was informed that even if I pulled her out of the district, at any point, if she ever tried to return back to DPS, she would still have to go to that alternative school. So Jenna kind of jumped in and picked up where I left off because I was frustrated and overwhelmed. So Jenna began to send emails, draft documents on my behalf. We tried to have another meeting at the school to prevent my daughter from going to this alternative school, because I had heard pretty bad things about this alternative school. Like, this is where children were placed who had gun charges, fights, failing. It's just not the type of crowd that my daughter would mix well with. So while waiting to hear back, Jenna got us a meeting. We had a meeting at the school, and they still decided to stick with the decision to send her to the alternative school. And I said, I'm not doing it. I refuse. I'm going to put her somewhere else. And Jenna was kind of there to be that third party of wisdom. And she said, just give it a shot. I'll call her in the morning before school. If she needs anything, I'll talk to her. My daughter would literally cry before she got out the car walking into that building. So Jenna was very supportive for her. The pandemic hit. So my daughter was only there for about 9 days. I'm like, well, that's a little bittersweet situation for us. But it kind of made things worse because I really wasn't getting a call back or hearing from anybody. So where I was discouraged and they would email and Jenna call like, hey, did you get that email? I'm like, no, I didn't even look at it. I'm like, well, can you respond for me? Can you do that? Because I work in human services and I've been in human services for about 15 years and I advocate for adults. But in this situation where you're emotionally invested when it's your child, it was different. I needed Jenna there to help guide me. So the work that the Student Advocacy Center do is very, very important. Jenna was able to reach out to the deputy superintendent because we were told that she was the end all be all who can make the final decision. And in the end, it did work in our favor. Renaya was allowed to return back to DSA. And I was very happy because at the alternative school, when the pandemic hit, my daughter was an AB student. She was passing all her classes. So they said, oh, well, if you're passing, you don't have any work to do. I'm like, so she's supposed to sit here till June and do nothing? Because they had already made the decision that they weren't returning back. And I was nervous because she was going into her senior year. She was having SATs and she was getting ready to head to college. So the Student Advocacy Center was able to get my daughter a SAT prep coach, a tutor, who helped her, and they also brought the book for her. And Jenna did her home visits, and she had to sit on a porch in the cold, which I appreciated. And she would work with Renaya. Renaya would made sure Renaya was on her Zoom call with her tutor. It was different for me navigating working from home. I have another child who was doing homeschooling. So it was just that perfect time to have that support. When they made the decision to allow Renaya to come back to DSA, they had all her grades and her transcripts wrong. Jenna emailed and, hey, you missed this class, you didn't do that. And by the time Jenna was done, my daughter entered her senior year with more than enough credits to graduate. Thank you. And she caught things that I didn't. Renaya, she did her senior year at home, and when her case was getting ready to close, my daughter literally cried. She was like, Jenna's leaving me. And she didn't want to tell Jenna. She was scared. She was shy. But Jenna reassured her, you can always call me. I will always be there for you, whatever you need. Just when I have to close your case, which is a good thing. And I invited Jenna and the Student Advocacy Center to her open house. And she's now a freshman at Alabama State University, which is why she's not here today. So I think that is a true testament to the work that the Student Advocacy Center does, because they were charging my daughter with a felony. And you also helped me get a lawyer to fight that case too. And it was dismissed. But had she had that on her record, she would not have gone to college. She would not have been eligible for financial aid. So I am forever grateful to all of you and all of the work that you guys do. And I would love to see this agency continue to flourish. Thank you.